What can you give back to it? That's part of the work at the altar. It's not about just calling in, this is what I want to invoke, this is what I want to manifest. The altar is a place to give. It's a place for offerings. It's a place that I give prayer. The lighting a candle is an offering. Lighting an incense is an offering. I'm offering smoke for my prayers.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Blue Hour podcast, where we explore the minds and the worlds of visionary artists and creators. This week is part 2, so it's the Lunar Segment with Naha, founder of 22 Teachings in Los Angeles. And you'll see how beautiful it is because she lets herself be vulnerable as I'm asking her these more intuitive, subjective, emotional questions. She lets herself really feel deeply before answering and to give out, objectively what she's seeing and feeling there, which allows for a lot of vulnerabilities and just a very beautiful moment I found. She shares different aspects of a practice that is so valuable because it's something practical that you can put to use in your life on a daily basis. So like a little ritual that's based off the Magician card and the Tarot. And she shows and shares how she uses an altar and how you can also use one as a devotional act of giving and not just receiving, but it goes both ways. I think you're gonna like this one, so let's jump right in. Are you stressed?
No. Did you just want me to talk about the practice?
Yeah, so I gave you a bit of the layout, the 3 parts. They have no specific need to be in a specific order. Mm-hmm. Oh, you have the Secret Teachings of All Ages. Mm-hmm. That's the first book I read in my spiritual journey.
That's definitely one of the first ones that I read through too. Not that one, but my reader's edition, which I think is down here, cover to cover, just like went through that. I think, gosh, if I would have something now that I do use as a reference book, but some of those things that I read early on, it's just incredible to go back to them, and especially what we're working with in the lodge right now, the Sepher Yetzirah, and that's a book that I've read several times over. We've gone over it, we've gone through it in the lodge before, and what I'm getting out of it now is just so far beyond what I had experienced reading it the first several times. So that book, Mystical Qabalah by Dion Fortune, is another one. And then the Kabbalion, as simple and accessible as that is, continues to give just like a deeper, timely insight every time I go reread that. So, but the practice that I wanted to share is actually really one of being able to balance. And so it's interesting that we were talking about that finding balance, that finding that state between the intensity of the fire or the coolness of the water, and of course going in either direction. Too far in the fire and you're burnt to a crisp, and too far in the water and you drown. So to be able to use those in a beneficial way, and even to what William was talking about with the ideas of consecration and purification, that's something that's so important in all of the ritual work that I do and that we do as a group. And so that can be done very simply by anyone. If I have water on my altar and I have incense that is lit here that can represent fire, and so I can take that water and I can move that over myself as a purification. And I can imagine myself just clearing and soothing my heart, soothing my emotional body, and then I can take that incense and to consecrate, to make sacred, I can move that around myself. So one is releasing, and then the other one is bringing light in. But those processes of purification and consecration, it really is in the roots of the Western mysteries in ancient Egypt. When you go to the temples, that's what you see carved in the walls outside of the temple doors, are the aspirants being purified with water. And you see Thoth and Horus pouring the waters of life out of vessels over the person before they're even allowed to enter into the temple. And then when you walk right inside the temple door, you see the fumigation, the incense that's being held there. And so that would be the next step of the process. And with anything in Hermeticism, we're thinking of things on 3 different levels, by a minimum of 3 different levels, in terms of our interpretation of what it is that what we're working with, what we're doing. So if you think of purification and consecration in the most literal aspect, then you're just thinking of making something clean and making something sacred. But then you can go deeper into the symbolism of that. You can go into the analogy of that. What does it really mean? Am I just putting water on my arms and on my head, or am I really thinking of purifying something more deeply, and what it means to really clean out my internal aspects, to really purify my thinking, to purify my feelings? And then finally, I can consider it in that 3rd aspect, which is esoteric, which is what is it, taking it even to the next level, taking it to a deeper symbolic level. And that's something that really I find comes from studying. So any human can connect to an analogy. Anybody can connect, can put 2 and 2 together through experience and go, oh, I kind of understand that through my own lens. But the really beautiful thing about diving into the esoteric is that there is history, and there are texts, there's oral traditions, and there's work that's already been done by the people that came before us. And so we have that work that we can then study, and that we can go so much deeper than just what our own personal speculations can get us to. We can study with teachers. We can get those esoteric secrets that are handed down across the ages. And so that goes to what I was saying about getting into a place where things get more and more and more complex. And at some point in that esoteric analysis, I find that things start to look a little less like literature and a little bit more like math, where you're looking at ratios and almost like an algebraic kind of consideration, or you're doing numerology, and so those things come into play. But those are 4 steps that you can interpret something through. And I can think of purification and consecration, the esoteric influences of the sun and the moon, for instance. But there is a place beyond that. And that's what I was mentioning before, that when you go through all of that, and I can have a very structured ritual with very specific words that I say and very specific postures that I hold, and I can refine that over time, and that ritual can build in power. And every time I do the ritual, I'm adding another layer of experience. And so it gets more potent. And then inevitably it stops working. There comes a point where it's like the magic doesn't feel magical anymore. What's happened? Oh, I guess it's wearing off, or I got everything that I was supposed to get out of it. And I find that it's at that moment when suddenly you realize, I don't know, it's not really doing it for me anymore. What happened to like that early magic where I felt so much? You have a choice at that point. You can walk away and you can say, it's time to turn my interest to something else. Or you could recognize that you could be right at a threshold. You could be right at the brink of having a breakthrough and actually a leveling up and a graduating to the next level. And I find, and I think this is true not only of magic, but of whatever you're involved in, if you get to that point where you say, this thing is not giving me anything anymore, I'm not getting a feeling, I'm not feeling inspired, I'm not getting clarity. Imagine in that time turning it around and not asking what can you get from it, but what can you now put into it? Because you have extracted, you have gotten the juice, as you like to say, out of it. And now you can take that and put that energy into the ritual, into the magic. There's an exchange there. And it's like anything, you know, the fascination wears off because it becomes the embodied, because it becomes like second nature. And you can take it for granted and walk away and go look to the next thing and repeat the process and until you've extracted what you'll extract from that next thing, and then keep wandering forever. But if you stay the course and you recognize it's not just a matter of having a pipeline that you just continuously drink from, but there's an exchange. And when it feels like, okay, I've gotten what I need to get from this, then see what you can give to it. See what you can add to it. What can you put into it? What can you give back to it? That's part of the work at the altar. It's not about just calling in, this is what I want to invoke, this is what I want to manifest. The altar is a place to give. It's a place for offerings. It's a place that I give prayer. The lighting a candle is an offering. Lighting an incense is an offering. I'm offering smoke for my prayers that rise. There's a sacrifice that's happening invisibly. Once the candle is burned and the incense is burned, they're not going to be there anymore. Those have been turned over. They've been given over. They get transmuted. So the exercise that I want to share, and that's also very, very simple, is found in the tarot on the very first key, the Magician card. I think that the tarot is a textbook of magical practices if you can read it in that way, which my little magician, which you can, anyone can, right, sweetheart? So what is above the magician? The sign of infinity. And it's that sine wave that you were talking about earlier. And so the practice is very, very simple. Let me grab her. Come here, sweetie. You can help. We're doing magic in the real world with the things that we have at hand. And so you take that shape, you take that figure 8 pattern, and you bring that into your mind's eye, and you can use your breath and you can use your visualization along with that, and just allow light to move in that pattern. And as you're doing this, you're imagining, you're harmonizing the two sides of your brain. I know that I'm demonstrating it, but it's all happening in my mind's eye. If I could project a beam of light that everybody seeing this could follow along. But you can imagine, and I would recommend that anybody watching this goes ahead and closes their eyes with me right now. And just visualize that moving back and forth. Doesn't need to be pushed. Just very gently moving. And some people are better at visualizing than others, and that's just a skill you develop as you practice it. It's not a thing you need to be born with. And you feel that harmonizing, you feel that centering. And if you link your breath to it, even better. And then after you've done that for a few minutes, You focus right on the very center point. That's where everything comes together. That's the crossing point. That's the threshold. That's the portal. That's the crossroads. And just center yourself right there. You might even still see the energy continuing to move. And just open yourself at that place. And then you can finish that by taking a big deep breath. And then exhaling and dropping it all the way back down to your feet. So you just ground it. Wasn't that lovely? Have you harmonized your little mind? So that's a practice that I think can be very simple. You can do it anywhere. You don't even have to close your eyes to do it. You know, sometimes when I need to do something, it's when I'm driving my car. You guess what? You can do breath work when you're driving. You're always needing to breathe. So you can find those times and places. People say, oh, how do I make space in my daily life to have practices? Where do I find the time to meditate? Where do I find, how can I balance my life? And we have those opportunities. We can multitask. We can do those things. It doesn't need to be carved out and set aside. It can be incorporated within. I can be standing at my stove, cooking myself dinner, and be doing some breath work and some visualization and even some meditation at the same time. So the opportunities are all around us to do that. And we can make it as I said, as put as many steps to it as we want, but at some point, moving through that is about taking us back to a place of absolute simplicity, because that's the goal. Unity.
That's very beautiful. Oh, sorry.
That's the one. Unity. The one, the crown, bringing us back to there, not the 10. So, did I do all the things?
Yeah, no, that was very, I think it's a very easy, like you have to take the time to visualize it, but as you say, you can sync it with the breath and while you're in the car or whatever, and it can be just I like it because it's practical for even any, you know, artists and visual artists, performance artists that are watching this, that just need a technique to ground themselves in the present before doing any exercise, doing any of their art.
Well, it's so many things get halted because of an internal debate. This part of us is like, oh, but I got to do this, that, and the other thing. And then there's that debate inside. There's that struggle inside. And as we've been talking about, it's not a matter of going just one voice has to win, or even that the voices need to compromise. But imagining that those different facets, they're dancing. You know, it's very, that shape, that pattern, it's a pattern of grace. It's a pattern of communication. It's a pattern of being in flow and combining it with the breath, combining it with the visualization. That's bringing it through multiple places, and then ending it with the grounding, allowing the movement. I used to say all the time, good magic begins with groundedness and ends with gratitude. But over time, I realized groundedness needs to start and end, and gratitude is at the beginning and at the end. So if you start with ground yourself, and start with, just like you walked in and you said, thank you for inviting me into your home. You know, and when we're all done and we wrap things up, ground again. And the groundedness feels very different after a practice than it does before. And every ritual, I always close with thanks. I always close with gratitude for my teachers, for my guides, for my not even just my students and those who are engaged with me in the moment, but even for, as I like to say, the initiates of the future for whom we're stewarding the tradition forth. So giving gratitude in all of those levels, and then closing it so it is. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very simple, very powerful. That's amazing.
Good.
And I think what we should do next, I'll ask you the follow-up questions.
Okay.
And then we can do the same for you, William, if that's okay. So these are very simple questions, but that...
Should I sit down again?
Yeah, if you want.
Okay.
Why not?
I had to put socks on. My feet were getting cold.
Yeah, it is a chilly day today.
It usually starts warming up around this time, and it's not, and I'm just very into it. And I haven't had all my windows open in a little while, so it's kind of cool to have a different ambiance in the home, even to have the furniture moved. My old roommate used to rearrange the furniture all the time. I'm not a person that, like, once the furniture is where it is, I don't think about rearranging it, really, unless I get something new. But he would rearrange the furniture, like, by the week. Sometimes the couch would be here. And it always was so fascinating to me, because not because he was doing it, but because he even thought to do it when it was just not something that was on my radar.
It's funny, I have like 3 planets in Cancer. I have very strong Cancer placement, and it's the synonym of the home, the inner world. Mm-hmm. So for me, the home, like, I found exact correlation with my inner world.
Yes.
So if I would change the rooms, I change it like in 2 years, maybe like 5 times. The living room would now be in this room, meditation room in this room, my office there, my bedroom there, because I had like 5 rooms, so I would always switch them. And depending if my meditation room was smaller, in my living room bigger, the boxes in my mind would change literally.
Yeah, that's like a Freudian idea too, isn't it? The correlation between the external home and the...
It's literal. I'm telling you, it doesn't affect... You change your furniture, you're going to feel different, you're going to think different when you're inside. Like, it's a cool exercise. And I don't know, Taurus, sometimes it's... Do you change your furniture often?
Not often, but yeah, I mean, for sure it's something that I feel the effects of. Because again, the structures, right? It's the flow of the energy, it's the flow of our consciousness. So it definitely affects things. For me, I usually go outside of my home to get that change. It's very easy for us in the way things, especially in cities, people often will stay home, like in Los Angeles. I don't want to drive in the traffic, and so they'll just stay home. And I think if you're somebody that is at home a lot, it's probably good to move things around to change your environment up, because we can concretize these structures that we exist in, and it's important to be able to move the energy. I think moving the energy is a really integral thing to realize in doing magic. And having a fluidity to one's life, because again, we get we get this sense of there being roadblocks, or get the sense that that things are bound up. And we can change that by moving things around. And yeah, I think that that's a really integral thing, movement. Because movement is vibration, right? And that's the principle behind all of the various ways that manifestation occurs, is the various rates of vibration, the permeability of existence.
Yeah, good point. So let's jump right in. It's 3 questions. It's quite simple.
Okay.
Question 1 I call the initiation. What gives you the most joy in your life? If you go back to being a child to now, what is the current? The current for me is the vibration that feels good. That is kind of linking all the moments in your life until now, and that keeps you steady along the path.
Gosh.
It's a good exercise, I think, to think about, because it's really the common thread of everything.
The common thread that I see throughout every single part of my life is really getting down into the why and the how and how things work, and being behind the scenes in whatever aspect, whatever thing I'm involved with. I want to know what is backstage, what is in the what exists in the recesses. I think of myself very much as maybe an archaeologist or just like an explorer in that way. So I find great joy in just getting into the unknown. And I think that when I was younger, that looked oftentimes like trespassing. And as I learned over time ways to get access and kind of finding that I could position myself into choices that I was making or people that I was involved with that would allow me to have access to things. And then that has evolved into being able to do that as a magician, to be able to explore the esoteric, which is all about diving into the mysteries, but then also just really enjoying being the person who is providing the experience for others from a sort of behind the table, behind the desk, behind the scenes kind of place, and then being able to present that outwardly. So I really have always loved that. It was really conducive growing up in Seattle, where I met William, because there was such a thriving underground culture there at the time. So that supplied that mystery and that getting down in and that sort of hidden access. And so now that manifests in this way of being able to be connected to the mysteries. But I really find that another thing that's been a through line, and I mentioned it before, has been working with the tarot. And I have been a professional tarot reader for 15 years, and I teach about that, and I've worked with the tarot for over 30 years. But there never is a day that I am not amazed by what is able to come through that medium, because I do tarot readings almost daily, and it's just never ending what is able to be accessed when I'm working with that, and the capacities, the capabilities that I've been able to develop through working with that are truly, I think, truly phenomenal. And so I really, that was my gateway into the occult, and just continues to really be so rewarding for me.
Okay, I think you've answered it in a very beautiful way, giving all the nuances as well, because not just the current, but how it also has been fluctuating throughout your life in different circumstances. Mm-hmm. This leads to the second question, and you'll understand the structure of the questions after the third one, mm-hmm. or maybe even after the second one. But the second one is called the descent. Mm. So what shadow or fears have you had to face and let go along the journey? If like the current was bringing you through this exploration of the mysteries, there's always, the soul doesn't want a journey that's just straight. They want some blocks so that you can overcome them. What was those main blockages that what came in your way, the Saturnian forces that came in your way along your journey? That blocked this current, you know?
Mm-hmm. The things that I feel have blocked me are not things that I've encountered. They're things that I've realized that I've carried. So it's not like I've gotten to points and gone, okay, this is now being introduced as a block in my way. The block always comes from the inside. And so in the past, that very much was my addictions and the unhealthy manifestation of my addictive personality that put me in a position not only that I wasn't going to be able to proceed, but that I wasn't going to be able to remain alive if I didn't transmute that. And so that was a pretty major aspect. And beyond that, I would say fear is something that I have actually a proclivity for, that if there's something that is fearful for me, I have a tendency to actually get kind of excited about that and want to go towards that. I put myself purposely into potentially terrifying situations. I don't try to avoid that or think of it as something to contend with. I think that I like to challenge myself. One of the examples I can think of is traveling. I love traveling. I love pilgrimaging. I love going to sacred places. And I love going by myself. And that can be very terrifying. I've been in several situations where, you know, it maybe was not the safest thing for me to be doing, or having very little resource or connection. And yet it wasn't that something else forced me into that position. I put myself there. I knowingly was like, I'm going to let go of safety. I'm going to just go into a very unknown situation and see what happens there.
Do you feel like even your soul put you in this lifetime with these addictions so that early in life you could be thrown with the unknown of, you know, like almost when you go into a substance, it will open up a realm that you're out of control in a way. And in the same way now, perhaps if you face this, it still comes out in yourself now being in control and going for it.
I've never thought of it that way. That's so interesting. Because I know I meet people that say that that's the reason why they don't want to explore psychedelics or do drugs, because they say, I don't like that feeling of being out of control of my mental capacity or whatever. I never had that problem. I was like, I want to go as completely to the ends of the universe as I can. And I spent a lot of years in my youth exploring psychedelics and having all kinds of like totally out of control experiences. And, you know, I say like I burned my 9 lives several times over. Like it's crazy the fact that I survived as many things that I did. But I've never connected that together, that a transmutation of that would be this more conscientious relinquishing of control. That's very interesting. And timed with my sobriety and the requirement of that, because that did require me to go through a totally traditional 12-step program, AA. And the third step of that program is to turn the care of your well-being over to your higher power, which is very similar to the practice to a mystical practice, is to turn your will to the divine, over to the divine will. And or as a Christian likes to say, let Jesus take the wheel. And that's really how I live. And I am put in positions to, like I said, without saying too much, where I'm put right now, like loosen your grip. And that can be scary, I think one of the most terrifying things that I can remember from my childhood, I was taking swimming lessons, and we had gone through all of the parts of swimming over the summer, and all that was left was diving. Now, diving and swimming are two different things. But the pool that we were at had a regular diving board, and then it had a high dive. And one of the last things that all of the children had to do was walk to the end of the high dive and jump off of it. And I remember climbing the ladder and being the most terrified that I can remember. Even now, I can't remember. I mean, I've bungee jumped in Vegas and like done some other things, but that, when I climbed up to the top of that high dive and walked the plank, I stood on the end of the board and I burst into tears. And I was like this, I think like the second to last to go. Like everyone else had just run and jumped and cannonballed off that thing. I stood on the end of that board. I bawled and I froze, and I turned around and I climbed back down. No matter how brave or reckless I have been in other areas of my life, I still have a threshold.
How old were you?
I was probably like, I don't know, maybe like 7 or 8,
because
something like that.
What this brings to my awareness is, for me, I've had lots of mystical experience because of my Cancer placement with water. Mm-hmm. And like water is always the divine feminine, and it feels like you were kind of subconsciously being asked to surrender again, like holding to the bar, mm-hmm. and jump into the mysteries because when you jump into the abyss, like the Dath center, mm-hmm. you really like abandon yourself to the goddess, and then she takes you, she destroys all the parts of you and gives it back to you in her way.
Yeah. So
it's kind of that fear of losing control of the ego, of everything basically you are. Mm-hmm. That same fear is symbolically reinterpreted into this jump board, into the unconscious waters.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember even at that young age, one of the things that was the worst for me as a Leo was how embarrassed I was, because it was happening in front of my teachers, in front of my friends. I think that it was the shame of climbing back down that distressed me even more than like the fear of the height, which of course it felt so towering in that moment, but.
And it leads to the third question, which I feel you've touched upon it, but because seems like we've touched upon a few different things that were unexpected.
This is like the most epic therapy session of all time.
The third is the rebirth. So with this current that's been dragging and connecting all moments of your life, which is the thing that brings you joy. Then there's the descent, the fears you've had to face. Mm-hmm. But then it's the rebirth, how these things are alchemized and giving you a new purpose, a new sense of direction. Mm-hmm. What do you think was given to you by spirit after, you've gone through difficult things, the addictive part and the ego part of going down the ladder as a 7-year-old, like all these things are not leaving any trace, like they have an impact on you. They give you something when you take time to face them. So It can be something that's ongoing, can be something that is starting, can be something that you feel you've alchemized already, but maybe share something about that rebirth process if you want.
There's a ritual that I wrote several years ago that's called Rite of the Six-Rayed Star. And it's become a really integral part of our school sort of body of rituals, where we have traditional rituals. And the first line of that ritual is, I am in a constant state of becoming. And when you asked me the question about the process of rebirth, initially, it's hard for me to pinpoint that when I feel like it's something that's constantly unfolding. You know, one of my favorite, I have several favorite trees. I love a California pepper tree, but I have always been connected to the palm tree. It's been very symbolic for me from childhood. Being born in LA, but growing up in Seattle, and every time I would come back to LA, it was for summer vacation or see my grandparents, and the first thing I would, coming out of LAX and coming into the city, the first thing that I would notice would be the palm trees. So they became symbolic of this like childhood, just like beautiful, fun, exciting time. But the way that a palm tree grows, I don't know that it's even really technically a tree, because the way that it grows is more like a grass. It grows up the center, and then the palm fronds come out through the center, and then eventually they come all the way down, and that's how it gains height. And I think that it's one of the symbols of our lodge, because it's such a beautiful physical expression of that rebirth idea, but in this constant state of becoming. It's not a matter of like a pine tree that sheds its needles, or a deciduous tree that sheds all of its leaves and then goes through the winter in that way. In this constant state of becoming, of course, there's markers when there's been really big, amazing things that have happened. Opening the school, beginning the lodge, the trips that I've been able to, that we've taken the students on, going to Prague, going to Egypt. All of these are maybe those speak more to things that I've birthed than that I would connect with rebirth, but I'm so much a part of the things that I'm creating,
But I think the rebirth for me, it is kind of, there's many levels to this three-part question, but initiation is kind of like the thing you have even as a child, and it continues throughout your life, but there's always stuff that comes with Tico, it comes and it kind of blocks it, and you have to overcome it, and then it blocks a little bit more. And the rebirth is really the transition where now you're living your life not, restricted, because you're about giving. And that's what you're describing with the school, the trips, is all about what you've been giving. It's the gift of life you give to others. How the light now has a way to be transmitted. Through the current, you receive that light, it gets altered throughout your life, and now you're finally, there's fruits that are benefiting others that can get minerals from the fruits from the light. So that is the whole process, right? It's sometimes just seeing these three stages helps to like wrap it up and bring even more power to those gifts and see them in the...
Sometimes it's very profound, and sometimes it's very subtle. And William has taught me so much about that, and the idea of sometimes it really is a matter of, it's the subtle refinements. And that's where I've spent a lot of the past years of my life. I would say probably especially the past 5 years since since having the physical location of the school is not so much in like the big moves, but in the continual refinement and trying to, be a human, and at the same time to dial things in. I as I shared, it was over a decade and a half ago that I got sober, but then 2 years ago I changed my diet and changed to a vegan diet, and it's like these are kind of things that is a lifelong work of trying to dial myself in and give myself allowance and freedom and ability to make mistakes, or climb back down the ladder if I need to, but also to continuously evolve, to always work on myself, to always push the boundary, and to always try to get closer to that state of my higher self.
Yeah, that's the ongoing process, ever ongoing process.
Look at her right
She's
now.
sleeping upside down.
She's just like, I've got to be right here, right in the middle of things.
Thank you so much for sharing this and being vulnerable with it as well.
Thank you for bringing it up, bringing it out of us.
Usually I have a bit more questions. I think for time, I'm just going to ask you like 3 or 4, and they're thunder. It has to be kind of quick, but I know that they take time sometimes to because it's abstract.
Okay, I'll take a sip of coffee.
Yeah. I'll ask you, let's say 6.
And then you're going to ask William the same, right?
Yeah.
You get all this time to think about what you're going to
Yeah,
say.
you got the
I kind of
advantage.
wish it wasn't that way.
Yeah, sometimes that's the thing. But the second part, I'll ask you different questions, so then you cannot know in
good.
advance.
Good.
No
good.
cheating.
What image or symbol haunts you in a beautiful way?
What image or symbol haunts me in a beautiful way? Give me a second. Let me call it up. A past love.
Okay, the image of a person.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If your spirit had a voice, what would it sound like?
Low, succinct, and like a mic drop.
Perfect. What color feels the most like home to you, and why?
Gold. Because I'm a Leo.
What do you think your shadow self loves that you don't admit yet?
I feel like I've admitted most of my subversive loves. Can you ask the question again?
Sure. What do you think your shadow self loves that you don't admit yet?
That's right, it's coming. What does my shadow self love that I don't admit yet? Admiration.
And lastly, And by the way, like I'm intentionally not going through because I know these things could be expanded upon, but it's like a little bomb and then you can see how it explodes outwards afterwards. A recent meaningful dream you've had?
They happen so often. A recent meaningful dream that I've had. I'll bounce it back to say that the most meaning has recently been derived from the point right upon awakening. I've been going to bed often recently with a lot of questions. And the minute I'm waking up, it's like being flooded with solutions, connections, ideas, synthesis of things that felt separate upon going to sleep. So
the blue hour time of the day, in between the night and the...
Yeah, everything showing me how things fit together. Synthesis has been very thematic lately. And so that's been the most fruitful thing for me, connected to the idea of dreams.
Yeah, it's that moment where your conscious mind comes out, and then all the, it's like before bed you create the recipe, you put it in the oven, and it blends together, and then in the morning you can connect the final product with your current questions and your physical.
I'm hearing the ding of the Easy Bake Oven, just loading it up before bed. I love that. And then in the morning, ding, it's ready.
And in a way, like I relate to that in my art, because that's what I do. I put different informations in, let it cook, and meditate. Something comes out, a recipe, blending everything together.
I love sleep. If it was up to me, I would sleep 14 hours a night. I don't get that luxury ever. I've got so much I'm always doing. But if I'm left to my own defenses, I would sleep more than half the day.
Well, that says something.
Very feline.
But I just want to end. I have a feeling. Have you had your Vedic astrology chart read before? Are you Cancer?
I'm a Leo.
You're still
in
Leo?
both.
Okay. So
yep,
you're on the
because
threshold.
I'm that far.
Okay. But
even in the 13 sign astrology, I'm still a Leo, no matter which way you cut it.
Do you have a lot of planets in the 4th house?
I have a lot of planets in the 10th house.
Yeah, probably with everything you're doing. Okay. But I was just going to offer, if ever you want me to check.
I'd love it. Oh my goodness. That would be absolute. I would be so grateful for that. Yeah.
Thank you for this segment. And now let's do the next one. Thank you guys for watching. If you did like this episode, subscribe, like, share. Really, that's the best thing you can do if you want to support the channel, because it lets the algorithm know that the channel is liked and should be pushed to more people. And that's the only thing that really creates this ripple effect out. So take the time. It takes 2 seconds just to click and it'll do a big difference for me. So hope you guys enjoyed. Next week we have the second lunar segment with William, which if you know him from from the teachings he's been doing with 22 teachings as well, but all the conferences he does, he has a lot of wisdom packed in him. So this episode will also be one you won't want to miss. So until next week, lots of love to all of you guys, and I'll see you next week.